So it's my pleasure now to welcome my colleague Richard Dobson, who is in our Institute of Psychiatry, Psychology and Neuroscience and is the director of our Health Informatics department. We can see you online. Could you try sharing your screen, please, Richard?
Yeah, certainly. Okay. Do you have that there?
Yes, we can see it. That's great.
Lovely.
Thank you.
Okay. When do you want me to stop, Richard?
I'll tell you. So just carry on. About 20 minutes.
Good.
Thank you.
Okay. Right. So thank you very much for the invitation to talk today. So I'm going to talk a little bit about two opportunities, really, two types of data. Firstly, the data that's collected as part of routine healthcare within secondary care settings, so hospital settings, and then the opportunity provided by the collection of data from people's smartphones and wearables, so data that people generate themselves as part of everyday kind of life. So you probably know that there's we do collect a huge amount of information within the healthcare records within the NHS, and I think we know the value of the electronic health records, potential huge insights to be gained from having access to this data, this vast volume of data, which includes medical records and pharmacy and labs and claims and radiology, etc. And so, there's insights to be had for areas such as safety and comparative effectiveness research and other areas. So, it's this big kind of triangle of a wedge of data here to the right, which kind of largely unused or underutilized, which we think there's a big opportunity to kind of to use if we can get access to that. And so what we've been working on developing over probably the past 7 years or so is a platform called CogStack. And this allows real-time data ingestion from hospital systems and allows you to pull in from lots of different data types, data sources, and also allows you to collect the structured data as well as the unstructured data. So a large proportion of the information that you provide, that doctors enter about you, will be in the form of text, in the form of narrative. And it will be stored in different systems, and you'll probably know that the systems often can't communicate with each other, and you'll end up having to write a letter will be sent from one place to another describing the treatment that you've had. So it's a hugely kind of, although we have huge amounts of data, we don't have a very good way of using that data to generate insight and then to generate interventions. So we developed this solution, as I say, called CogStack, which allows us to pull the data from disparate sources and makes it available for a number of different use cases or applications that are then built on top of it. So it creates a Google-like capability, and we can use this to improve safety through automated alerts, improved data quality, through improved clinical coding. We can use it to identify trial cohorts, and we can use it for managing populations and caseload through dashboards, for example. And so it was really kind of developed with the realization that health data is extremely heterogeneous, and the adoption of healthcare interoperability open standards is really kind of uneven. And users often bypass the structured data entry whenever there's inadequacies in the user experience, or whenever they're presented too many forms. With too many forms, they'll abandon those and just type into a free notes section. And we need to be able to develop machines or capability or AI that can actually just work with what we have, rather than trying to perfect a new solution, which I think won't be able to do. We have to kind of develop these solutions that are able to handle this data. And so our solution is this ecosystem of loosely coupled technologies. It's open source. It's been developed in partnership with NHS trusts, clinicians, and domain experts. And we have governance models that allow us to access the data that have been replicated and localized according to needs, and it's agnostic to the underlying electronic health record itself. And so, as I say, it provides the capability to provide Google-like search capability, so putting a Google-like search interface into the hands of clinicians or those on the front line. Those searches that you might like to perform can be saved as alerts, as watchers. And so as new data streams in real time, those queries that you have pre-compiled will be running and looking for patients or events or other kind of things that match the criteria that you're interested in. Obviously, when you're working with text such large scale, a clinician will describe, or physician will describe the care in many different ways, and so we have to have machines or AI which will be able to read and understand and map that underlying text onto ontologies, and medical ontologies such as SNOMED CT and UMLS. So then that provides a capability to then perform downstream analyses with machines, because you've converted what is very easy to read for a human but difficult to read for a machine into information which is more structured and more harmonized and able to easier for machines to process downstream. And then we have the capability of dashboarding, of putting this information back at the bedside, so not just generating insights at the bench, but generating insights and using that data back to the bedside. And of course, we have a capability to actually be able to do that for direct care, but also to be able to de-identify information for research settings. So just an example here of a simple search tool enabling people to search over the complete full electronic health record, to be able to carve that data, to be able to chop it up. We can use this data for near real-time aggregation of keywords and phrases from clinical generated documents to produce a signal for secondary healthcare planning. So for example, this is examples here from the system deployed at King's College Hospital, Princess Royal University Hospital and Guy's and St Thomas', where we have real-time signals describing information that's trending in the electronic health record. So similar in a way that you see information trending on Twitter, we're able to pick up trending signals within the electronic health record. And so during COVID, this was able to give us an insight, an early insight, a couple of days in advance of lab tests coming back, an early insight into COVID cases, COVID incidence and prevalence within these hospital settings. So almost like a canary in the mine, if you like. And similarly, we've been able to do the same for infection within hospitals and looking at transmission and infection rates. So that gives us a kind of real-time feed. As I say, these searches or these real-time feeds can be monitored 24/7 and triggers alerts set off if there are kind of criteria matching things that we're interested in. So this can involve alerting for certain phrases or specialized drug names appearing in the record, so that they could prevent or could preempt any misprescribing. And we can detect abnormal test or scan results that are reported within the text part of the record. And we can do things like tracking the number of COVID cases and submitting those to national databases, and drug alerts. So there's an example here with methotrexate for rheumatoid arthritis, where we're able to actively manage patients with these long-term kind of conditions to determine when they're developing side effects, that potentially fatal side effects for drugs such as methotrexate, and then intervening and preventing that from happening. With things like valproate, we're able to alert this drug is very toxic in pregnancy and given to people with epilepsy. So we're able to identify people on this medication that are female and allow their doctors to recommend changes. So as I mentioned earlier, being able to kind of search and then trigger alerts and track things just based on the way that things are naturally recorded within the record is critical. But it's really important to be able to turn that information into structured information that can be subsequently analysed at scale downstream. And as part of doing that, we need to generate natural language processing, AI-based approaches that will read the information and interpret it, understand it, and create structured output. So go from a letter, say, to essentially what is essentially an Excel sheet, which contains a patient on each row, and then these medical concepts that have been described or extracted from the record. And so this thing we have here is part of the Comstack ecosystem is called MedCat, and that will structure the EHR. It's configurable to any clinical terminology and customizable to your own terminology if you want to create one. It runs in an unsupervised manner over the text that you provide into it, and allows you to validate and then perform further top-up tuning to really kind of home in on a specific kind of set of concepts that you might want to develop optimally. So there's a little demo here which you can try if you're interested. There's a QR code there, but this is just a web browser that allows you to test it out. This is not being trained on any NHS data, but has been trained on a US intensive care data set. And so, as you can see, it's annotating with SNOMED concepts. It's detecting and correcting spelling changes. It's detecting and disambiguating concepts that might have dual meanings depending on the context that they're surrounding. So HR, for example, could be heart rate or hour. And so depending on the context, the surrounding text will help determine that. And you're able to meta-annotate, so understanding whether a concept is positive, negative, current, historic, relates to a patient or to another third party. And so we've trained these models on everything within King's College Hospital, so about 1.4 million patients or so over 10 years worth of data, so a huge amount of NHS data there. And then we've taken these models and taken them to a hospital such as UCLH or a mental health setting such as SLAM, and said how well these models perform out of the box just as they are, and then detecting say disorders or medications, and then subsequently top-up trained them on the local data, track the performance improvement, and then what we have now is the capability to share these models onwards to other hospital settings. A key thing is to be able to operationalize some of these insights and some of these data. And so what we're doing, this is an example here within South London and the Maudsley, where we've drawn information from structured part of the record and the unstructured sources, including MedCat annotations, the SNOMED annotations, to enable clinician-facing tools for things like caseload management and population health management, patient-level disorder dashboards, and links back through to the electronic health record. So it's being used in various ways, from ranging from care delivery and planning by frontline clinicians through to pharmacy teams being able to perform rapid medication reviews and resource relocation by management teams. So automated medication reviews or augmented medication reviews from the pharmacy team are far more accurate and offer huge time savings, enabling pharmacy teams to review patients' medications at scale in a very short period of time compared to the hours that they would spend ordinarily having to sift through lots of different types of disparate information. Okay, so this is improving, just a plot here showing how this within SLAM, again, just showing how we're improving physical healthcare over time. So just being able to put data into the hands of care teams means that we're performing more frequent and more accurate physical healthcare checks on people with serious mental illness. So therefore improving the outcomes of people with serious mental illness in terms of physical outcomes, physical health outcomes. And this is particularly kind of pertinent where we see that, you know, within serious mental illness, on average, people have a life expectancy that is 10 years shorter than people without serious mental illness. So, of course, this enables us, this kind of access enables us to do lots of analysis on the data. And just within COVID, we were generating, because we were having near real-time access, we were generating very early insights into medications that were putting people, whether medications were putting people at higher or lower risk of severe outcomes when they were hospitalized. We were able to evaluate the kind of mandated early warning scores. We were able to get some of the early insights into risk associated with ethnicity. And, you know, this shows the final papers that were published in the journal, but actually the preprints were going on to preprint servers extremely early, and we were able to update those as new findings came out in near real time. And so that's very kind of complementary to what you would see in, say, larger data sets that might be national data sets, but were only relying on structured information, so the thin supernatant of information within the electronic health record. And also there was a larger lag with having systems implemented locally. We were able to access deep data and access that in near real time. Okay, so this allows us to really understand data at scale as well. So an example here is where we're taking everybody, all the data within King's College Hospital, and we're annotating with these SNOMED concepts. Here are 157 million SNOMED concept annotations for over 1 million patients over 10 years from King's, to understand both patterns of health and practice within that health system. And so the first figure is just showing at the age of first detection of these disorders, a set of disorders including MS and inflammatory bowel disease, etc., key disorders. And then we're able to look in the second figure here at how these kind of clusters of conditions appear together and how they transition over time, how you move typically from one condition to the next, and what are the risk events or what are the risks for that happening, or for you transitioning from one condition to the next. And so we've been able to, you know, whereas in COVID, you know, we might be looking at a specific question, so whether there's a risk of a medication creating a more severe outcome. When we're taking all of the data, everything, 190,000 concepts from SNOMED, and we're annotating that over time, over 10 years worth of time, we're able to build up these kind of trajectories or these kind of timelines for individuals. And then we're able to use modern language modeling approaches, here using generative pre-trained transformers, GPTs, to kind of really learn based on the history of a person about what will be, or predict what will be the future in terms of diseases, symptoms, medications, for example. We can make a suggestion as what's going to happen one step ahead, but we can also simulate or make a suggestion as to what's going to happen multiple steps ahead into the future as well. And so that's taking the output of the data extracted through CogStack, then subsequently processed through MedCat, and then, you know, organized into these timelines to understand these facts. And so we can use this to kind of understand, and basically we're understanding history, this history of patients within a particular hospital setting. So it's not a clinical decision tool, but it will tell you what is most likely to happen according to what has historically happened before. And that can represent good practice as well as bad practice. So we can use this to test how a hospital is adhering to guidelines. We can use it to perform counterfactual analysis. So if I give a patient that fits a certain kind of criteria a particular medication, what is the most likely thing to happen next? And if I remove that medication, what is the most likely thing to happen next? And we can compare. And so there's lots of opportunities for building out on this, building out use cases. I was just going to show you a web demo of this, where we can construct, there's a couple of examples, but here's a person, and, you know, we make a prediction as to what's going to be the next disorder for that person. This is happening live, and we get a series of predictions, we get a probability associated with that, we get a saliency score which tells us to what extent each feature within the history of this person has contributed towards the final prediction. But I'm not going to go into that because I think I'm running over time, and I want to cover the next section. So there's information here. The code is open source. Do get in contact if you want to, if you're interested in this community boards here that will help answer questions. So I just want to move on to talking a little bit about the opportunity of patient-generated data, which is obviously very complementary to information that's collected within the electronic health record. This allows us to shift from what is sparse, periodic information that's collected, usually, during once disease is being diagnosed or close to disease being diagnosed, and then through disease managed stages through to, the opportunity for continuous, pervasive and passive data collected all the way through from healthy at risk all the way through to managed disease. And so using these kind of devices, which are loaded with sensors, things like Fitbits and mobile phones, we're able to kind of infer a bunch of metrics which are potentially useful. Okay, so covering domains such as behavioral, physiological and environmental. And we want to be able to do these, to be able to combine these measures of, say, things like sleep, motor activity and heart rate, to understand what are the changes, when can we detect changes in these that are associated with, say, relapse or a deterioration in condition generally in association with, say, treatment response. So, and then obviously we want to be able to intervene when we can. So we needed to develop a platform to do this, because initially we were funded by a program called Radar CNS, which is a large EU program, and we found there's very little, which was looking at MS, epilepsy and depression. There was very little in terms of a platform to be able to collect this information. So we developed something called Radar Base that allows us to collect questionnaires, such as the kind of thing that you would see in Zoe, the symptom tracking app, and collect that alongside information from the wearable devices, which is more passively collected. So, information related to your sleep and activity, etc. And then we want to be able to, we pull that information in, we collect that, and we allow real-time analyses and visualizations and storage, and then management of people enrolled in studies. So we've got a range of devices that are already kind of available to use within a platform like this off the shelf, and that includes things like the Fitbit and Garmin, Empatica 4, Empatica Brace, IoT sensors, things like the banking apps, and a range of other things that are kind of integrated and available to just plug and play within the platform. It's being used across more than 45 case studies, again, in 20 different disease areas, 100,000 different study participants, with, as I say, a number of devices and apps already integrated into the platform. So I just want to highlight a couple of kind of areas with this before I finish. So one is the critical importance of being able to generate these digital biomarkers from underlying sensors and combinations of sensors, which are producing low level or, in some cases, raw data. We generate kind of low level features, so maybe speech features, maybe heart rate variability features, or features related to oxygen saturation, and then we kind of combine those up into higher level markers or higher level features that represent things like fatigue or physiological stress, and then use those to look for associations with, or causal associations and predictability for outcomes of interest for particular conditions. So within the Radar CNS program, where we're looking at depression, we're kind of deriving measures relating to mobility, so understanding how much time people were spending at home, looking at the kind of amount of distance people traveled, looking at various kind of circadian rhythms, and various kind of mobility, the number of different places people went to, for example. We're able to combine this with Bluetooth connectivity information, so understanding how many devices the patterns of connections that your Bluetooth device made, so your phone, so how many different devices your phone was seeing, which gives some indication of sociability or environment, especially if you combine that with GPS. Speech is a really important signal to be able to collect, so we're collecting that through both passively as well as through active speech, scripted speech tasks, and speech relating to free speech tasks as well. And understanding gait from the accelerometers and gyroscopes on the phones, and quantifying that and understanding changing patterns in gait in association with things like depression. And again, and as I say, sleep here. So we were able to kind of look at this in real time during COVID, look at the sensors and the data that we were generating in order to understand people's responses to things like the pharmaceutical interventions or non-pharmacological interventions, I should say. So really kind of monitoring home state, seeing how that changed, looking at distance people traveled, the kind of steps that people did, how people were sleeping, people's bedtimes, people's heart rates, that kind of thing. So really understanding how these kind of interventions were affecting the behavior of people, both to understand the impact of those on a kind of reduced transmission, but also the impact on people's, say, fitness or people's mental health state. So I thought I'd drop in a slide here, which would be of relevance, where we're using this platform to understand and track function in people with Alzheimer's disease as part of the RADAR AD project. Also, I've dropped this in because you mentioned a citizen science study there, Richard. So this was a citizen science study that we span up during COVID, where we asked people to sign up to an app and link their Fitbit data. And here we're able to look at Fitbit data historically as well as prospectively, and looking at passive signals and sensors that would be indicative of, say, long COVID tracking or predicting, as well as kind of diagnosis. And then we're doing further studies on long COVID as part of a convalescence project. And yeah, there's a lot of tooling here that's available for people, and a big team that put this together. It includes technology partners, and we're kind of migrating towards this kind of situation where we're getting live feeds of data from routine care, generating insights from that, generating opportunities for decision support, and starting to meld in and combine the patient-generated data into that, and also providing information from routine care out to patients as well, so that they can kind of better self-manage. And there's a large team of people here just to thank, from a number of different places, and a number of funders and groups here as well. Thank you very much. I'm sorry I ran on there.
That's okay. Thank you so much, Richard. Wonderful talk, and very pertinent to much of the discussion this morning. Any questions from the room, first of all? Svetlana.
Thank you, Richard, and thank you, Richard, for the presentation. I was wondering on COG stack, is it something you looked into or consider at all relevant or important? I'm just wondering, those doctors who log the results of their checkups or any kind of free text entries, while they know that they're being monitored always by an AI, will that change the way how they input information, even what type of information they put in? I'm thinking maybe both in positive ways, like trying to be more clear or like use more common terms, but maybe it also will stop them from maybe writing something that they concerned maybe they're mistaken or it's the assumption. So could that be a problem? This quality of data, also comparability between past records where clinicians didn't know that they're being monitored versus kind of more the recent ones? Thank you.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I think on the positive side, there have been many efforts to force people to put information into structured fields to enable downstream use, and they failed most often, I think, and I don't think that will change anytime soon. So I think what we're able to do here is, if we're able to generate insights from data and give those back to people, then people will start to think more carefully about the information that they're putting in, because, you know, I think to a large extent people don't get the value from that data as they should. So if they're starting to see the value in it, then they'll start to think more carefully about the data that they're putting into it. I think in terms of, and that's certainly what we're seeing, you know, but in terms of people being concerned about what data is putting in, what, you know, putting data in that might commit them to something, or, you know, they might be held to account on it. I mean, we're not judging people based on the information that they put in. I mean, I appreciate that concern, but you know, they're not. So there's no kind of all we're kind of looking at. We're tending to look at aggregated information for things like physical healthcare measures or something like that. So nobody's being picked out as an individual, and nobody's being, we're not going back to people and saying, well, you made this decision and we think that was probably a wrong one. So we're not doing that in any sense at all. But I do think it gives you the opportunity to potentially go back and do that, and to pick up on bad practice. Certainly we can see with the use of the Foresight tool, we can see that, you know, there are certain practices which could be picked up on and could be improved, and there's an opportunity to kind of intervene in that. But I don't think we have seen. I think that broadly there are concerns that there's a general concern. I think there has been a general concern from some people, some areas, that if you put a system in this place, into place, then it does expose things. And actually, it's a little bit, you know, well, maybe it's safer and we'll, you know, got less to worry about if we don't provide access to these kind of tools, because they could be a bit exposing. But we haven't seen anybody actually kind of change their behaviour yet and not record things. So we've only kind of seen the positives from it, I guess, so far.
Yeah. Thank you. There's one question online, maybe a quick answer about using CogStack for patient recruitment, especially for dementia research trials, which have poor recruitment rates.
Yeah, so initially we really developed CogStack for to help with recruiting people into Genomics England, actually. So that's why we originally put it in to King's College Hospital, because there was a requirement to recruit people to Genomics England, rare diseases particularly, and King's were under meeting their targets or not meeting their targets. So this is why we kind of really put it in. So for Alzheimer's disease or recruitment to dementia trials, yeah, it's absolutely a use case.
Davide, very quick question, please.
Yeah, so the very quick one, thank you, Richard, for the really excellent presentation and vision you're implementing at King's. Are you considering external partnerships, leveraging your infrastructure for data users external to King's, or is this only for internal users?
The platform can be deployed anywhere, and we have model sharing agreements in place such that people can take the platform and deploy it elsewhere and take on models. And you know, we have it in place at a number of hospitals now. But I think so. You know, we can share that. But I think what you're asking is, can people come and analyze the data, right?
Right.
Can people from outside come and analyze the data? And that depends a little bit on how, yes, they can essentially. So it depends on which hospital we're talking about. So at the Southlands and the Maudsley, we have a long history of that. You typically kind of set up with an honorary contract, and then you submit your kind of project application form. But there are, yes, so there are ways of, we don't keep it purely inclusive. We like to partner and give, but people obviously have to have honorary contracts and things like that.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Richard. With that, we'll move on to the next speaker. So thank you again, Richard. If you could stop sharing your screen, that would